All right, I'm going to start the meeting and then just try to keep an eye on the waiting room to see if we're missing quite a few people today. So welcome to the Commission on Disability October meeting. It's October 5th, 2021. Jeff Bagg said he's unable to make it today. So we are going to start with public speak, which Councillor Rothschild is here to talk to us.
Hello.
Take it away.
No, I'm just showing up to say hello and to let you know our ordinance review committee is finally, we finally issued our report to the council, and particularly the memo you wrote us about snow removals. We are recommending that get moved to the public safety committee. So I'm on the public safety committee. So I just want to, I'll keep you abreast as to where that is on our agenda, and hoping that we can kind of interface those two different committees to work on that. So hopefully you guys can come to our meeting as well. And just kind of talk about, I'm interested in listening to your 3 to 5 year plan. I saw it's on your agenda, and talking about ways that I can kind of liaison when there's what your legislative priorities are, so we can find ways to take that and move it into action in the city if need be, like kind of helping to figure out what committee, like introducing it to the council and getting it on a subcommittee so we can move things forward and just have a more integrated approach. So I'm just I'm here to listen, and I want to show up to as many meetings as possible. And I'm also going to be meeting monthly with Kelsey or anyone else that wants to meet to try to get things legs and keep momentum going forward on issues that are important to our community in terms of accessibility and universally designing our city. So that's it. Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you. Louise, are you here for public speak, or are you just here to join us?
Just here to watch.
Okay. All right. So Mayor LaChapelle is here. So excited. Thank you for coming.
Thank you for inviting me.
She's just gonna talk to us a little bit about accessibility and, whatever you want to talk to us about.
Okay. I'm happy to talk hold on. I have this on 2 devices because my internet is all wonky. Okay. Can you hear me a little better? Is it clearer?
It's very clear.
Okay, great. All right. Yes, so thank you very much, Angelique, as the chair of the Commission on Disability, for inviting me. I am excited to be here and take great excitement and pride that Easthampton's Commission on Disability is really stepping up and revitalizing. Thank you all who have served and who have stepped forward. I know Angelique had some really deep consideration about if she wanted to step into the chair position, and I thank her. Stepping into leadership is never easy, and no good deed goes unpunished. So that I wanted to just quickly say that. Just by virtue of understanding where my ideas on ability and versus disability and accessibility, I just want to give you a quick background of where I come from. I can't remember, 1995, joined an organization that worked with severe disabled students and families to keep them in public school districts. And the range of challenges went, from neurological to developmental to physical, photosensitivity and whatnot, and fought very hard to have inclusive practices in public education rather than institutional or schools outside of a district when the services were appropriate for the kid to stay in. So my overall philosophy is a kid, the word student seems so so stiff, but a kid, no matter what, needs a home base and wants to see a place for themselves in the community and should be there to the fullest extent they can. That said, and I guess the truth with adults as well, not everyone, it's about being ready to be, this is not an all or nothing. It's I think it's a step process. I think it's inclusion by design, and that inclusion and equity have to work together to make sure that there's not confusion that someone cannot be included because of an equity issue or lack of equity issue. So I worked in those fields with the families, a lot of trauma-informed work for 20 years, and then became an attorney focused on civil rights, disability rights, mobility rights, and also needs in design, universal design, and then started representing unions who were providing those, their members were providing those services in healthcare field for infants to the elderly. And then I ran for mayor. I have, that said, lots of experience with ADA and IDEA and those sorts of, I call them missives, important to open the door, but grossly underfunded, and some of that never funded. How it applies to Easthampton and my administration is that the Commission on Disability really touches all of our work. One of my big pet peeves, and I understand, municipal government very well, that we don't have all the money in the world, but one of my biggest, pet peeves about our city hall is that the entrance via elevator and the entrance via stairs are separate, and the elevator is quite isolated from the door. And I think that there are ways to have one entrance that everybody can access any building. Some would say, well, it's not financially feasible. And I disagree. We need to be more creative as we go forward. I think of how we designed elementary schools, 100 years ago when Maple was designed, and I look at the school that we're building now, where it's not only more accessible, it's universally more acceptable. Separate but equal doesn't count. A ramp separate from the stairs doesn't cut it. If we're going to be all one and have equal, equitable access to physical spaces, then it needs to be one. It needs to be one. It can be done. There's great work out there. It's not more expensive. The same goes with, non-physical disability or mobility issues, sight and hearing issues. I was so fortunate to help out with a not-for-profit group down in New York that just took down every misconception I had about being deaf and interfacing with the criminal justice system. And just those numbers are beyond, and how to train folks in public service, how to consider how they approach somebody and think on the onset what might be going on for that person, or how they communicate, they might not be able to hear you. I could go on with photosensitivity. I myself identify as disabled. I have a seizure disorder, probably for most of my life, and will remain on medication for the rest of my life to prevent those seizures. And in 2005, I had some really crazy seizures and I lost my memory for 3 months, which was very stressless for me, but very stressful for everybody else. So most of it's back. So when I stutter or I'm silent or whatnot, that's the result of me being I say neuro unique my own way, you know, what's typical and what's not typical. So that's kind of my intro to that as far as how I approach things. It is striking to me as mayor when we're talking about safety, pedestrian safety, cyclist safety, designing good public buildings, how siloed everything is, you know, the considering, you know, crosswalks and pedestrian safety and the blinkers. Like, I totally get the blinkers, but if you're photosensitive or you're triggered for seizures, or you don't know you have seizures and you're triggered for seizures, are those blinking lights in that particular rhythm, that's a real problem. That's not safe. And to balance that. And I remember seeing the stop sign over on South and Main. I want to try to think about what else we can do except putting a physical example up. And I think it's culture, and I think it's education and whatnot. And really, if we designed something that took all of those, like photosensitivity, it's very hard to find photosensitivity regulations and directions in any of the guidance that we have as city employees for pedestrian crossing. It's kind of like, this is the new gadget. So and also how we communicate, upgrading the website, moving to Google Meets so we can have closed captioning, the idea of certainly translation, but one of the it's great universal communication is sign language, universal sign language. I mean, there's, you know, ASL, you know, there's American Sign Language, and there's English, and there's Russian and whatnot, but the universal sign language, I think, really has a great place in municipal government and can easily be used on traffic signs. So that's kind of, you know, looking at everything fresh and thinking about accessibility and equity, not just being a ramp or a parking space, but really bringing our community, without even thinking about it, to be accessible and to be, you know, welcoming. I think the idea of welcoming isn't just saying hello. The welcoming is, you see one way to get into your city hall. You see one way to get into your council on aging. You see a light or sign that acknowledges not everyone looks at a sign or it lights the same way. So I don't know if you want to talk, Angelique, are there specific questions or initiatives? I know we're working on a grant for the commission.
I don't have any specific questions, but I don't know if anybody else does. And thank you for sharing that about yourself.
Yeah.
I have a very specific question that I just picked up on in that conversation that maybe this isn't the right space for it, but you mentioned Google Meets, and I was just curious why we'd move to Google if we are a Microsoft-driven community, when Teams also has that integration.
We moved to well, two things. One, it was safer for the IT infrastructure that we had, which was non-existent, and we needed to lock things down really fast. Zoom also was getting expensive, and we've had problems with Microsoft Teams, and we're migrating completely away from Microsoft. So it was kind of a, the transition was not what we wanted, but our Exchange servers, a couple of them caught on fire because they were so old, and we needed to flip over. Yeah. Yeah, that was a stunning day. Yeah, I never thought. Yeah, so no data
Ugh.
was lost.
That's good.
But obviously we didn't restart those servers. So our transition went from like 5 miles an hour to 75 pretty quickly. That's really and looking for, actually it would be great. I think I saw Lindsay on here. Certainly Karin Kamahort, our IT director, who and her assistant Noah would be more than happy to come to this committee's meeting and talk through frustrations or other solutions, because as they're really building our new IT infrastructure as we go, because we've been, the ransomware attacks and the age of our hardware. I think I'm looking for Lindsay to agree and not make a frown. There's Lindsay. Okay. Yeah, they would love the input and to figure out how commissions would like to access, and members of the public, the issues with accessing public meetings and stuff like that. I think Karin, I know she would be delighted to have the conversation. And we're rebuilding, this is a great time because we're rebuilding that whole department and the budget to do something more than just hold software licenses and really build an infrastructure.
So yeah, as part of that, I kind of wonder, and I know this would be, and Angelique, tell me to stop talking because I'm jumping a little bit into plan wise, but a little bit later down. I know one of the massive pain points in accessibility broadly, but certainly here, is a lack of knowledge and skill regarding accessible procurement. And I think IT is the place that usually that lives. So it's interesting to hear they're kind of looking to ramp and change, because I think it might be timely to ensure that we have really solid processes in place to vet our vendors before we get them. Just even with the Google thing, right? So Google has some really great things with its platform, has some really tough things from an accessibility standpoint for its platform that doesn't exist in terms of Microsoft, but you have to vet that before you get it. So I think I'd love to see, as part of a move forward, some integration into the procurement of the tools and services we access for our city, from things like technology to things like, hey, we're procuring this service provider to develop our trail maps and our signs on the trails. I feel like there should be a touch point integration with the COD to ensure that we are providing more of a holistic viewpoint as to like the implications of what they're going to do and how to include people as a part of that.
It would also be, thinking about, we actually, with the Honeywell project we just did, we bumped into some really crazy timelines with the Energy Advisory Committee, who felt, very snubbed, to just put it plainly, and wasn't the intent, but we had to move to get it, the timing of municipal government. That said, and I've been thinking a lot about that experience, would also be interesting or good around the integration and the touch point. Perhaps there's some general language we can put in RFPs around that. Kelsey smiles.
Yeah,
And
master
again,
service agreements, RFPs, and SOWs or SLAs. Yeah.
So, certainly Michael Owens and Karin, that's stuff that we're thinking about. And we have, as I think most people on the call, we have some big RFPs to roll out in the next year with those new schools, with some other projects that are going into town. So if we could maybe get some best practice RFP language from the committee, that would be amazing. And I know that we're looking, we've already done a part of a diversity ordinance, and maybe Lindsay can jump in here, because I know we did the wage theft ordinance, right? You guys passed that, Lindsay, but what about the diversity in procurement and local? Was that a part of wage theft, or was that something separate?
I'm not sure about that. The wage theft actually happened before I was a counselor.
I'm just wondering if there's not, similar to diversity, ethnic diversity, if there's not ability diversity and access diversity. language? There must be. I mean, it's kind of a rhetorical question, but there's got to be that base language somewhere.
I wanted to ask, is it possible, because that's kind of, when I came in, I was talking about getting things more integrated and interfacing with the Public Safety Committee, but really the Commission on Disability should be interfacing with everything that we do. And I know, and this is kind of a governmental question for you, Mayor. You know, sometimes the planning board and ordinance maybe have meetings together. Can like the COD have a meeting, like combined meeting with another committee?
Absolutely. Yes.
Because I thought that, yeah, I didn't give any of my background. I realized when Nicole Mayor was giving hers, I'm an instructional designer, and that's where I became really aware and invested in the work of universal design for learning in my role at Holyoke Community College, where I worked with Karen, who's our technology director. So I know she cares a lot about accessibility issues, and while she would welcome language in the RFPs and welcome any support. She has a huge job she's doing all by herself. So any support she would welcome any support in that domain. I learned there at HCC and working very closely with Office of Disabilities, just how important it was to design from the beginning and not retrofit. And I sat with people with assistive technology and saw how they experienced our online learning through screen readers, through you know, how the different with captioning and I spent a lot of time raising awareness among faculty. And because I think before that had kind of been like a separate thing. The Office of Disabilities works with that. They help students with that. It's not my job. They'll figure it out. And really that was the kind of ground one was PR and creating a video that we pushed out to the whole campus, showing them the experience of people with disabilities in their online classes and really getting the investment of faculty to design from the beginning, and putting dollars behind it as a college to pay for captioning for people to be able to send their videos and turn around with captioning. So that's where I really became interested and invested in it. And now I own an online learning company, and I work very closely with an organization called Kids Included Together in San Diego that teaches practitioners about inclusion and access in early childhood and young. So that's why I'm interested. I came and just kind of popped in, but as the mayor was mentioning, I'm really interested in figuring out ways to be creative and not be so siloed as well. So combined meetings, looking at RFPs, that kind of thing.
I have a follow-up question for the procurement side. So we have all of these agreements and contracts and things. Do we have a particular like repository where you can filter by those? Do we house them somewhere that's kind of easy to track or to find or to query by chance?
We're getting there. So a
Okay.
lot of it is siloed by departments, and we're moving towards interactive, like everything that I'm going to talk about going forward is now behind 6 months because of our infrastructure. I can't even call it infrastructure. It's horrific. But yes, so there is a way to get through the system and find that language. But we also rely a lot on those on state and federal databases. Like literally, if somebody asks us about language for, I don't know, an awarded RFP in 2016 from the federal government, we would more likely go to that federal site and look for it than even, bothering looking here. It'd be faster. But that said, one of the long-term projects is reevaluating procurement practices for equity and similar to what Lindsay did with the ordinances and kind of getting out that language. The state just rolled out a new project team to help with that. And most of the stuff that I've done since being mayor has been more on the employee side in protection against employers, which has covered some of the ground. There's overlap, with COD, but this is a great time though to start the conversation, because especially with IT, because we're redoing so many things and we're looking to change the police reporting process and software. Fire just updated their stuff. So, I mean, I think that there's a lot of, you know, I would encourage the committee, if they're so disposed, Angelique, to invite the chief, Karen, you know, Chief Norris or whatnot, to talk through what they're changing, but also what they're about to change. We're trying to keep it as fluid as possible. I think we've learned that buying one thing and making that like a really concrete, tangible thing doesn't work, certainly in IT anymore. And that we have to be, you know, fluid. Things change fast.
I think I see
I
Jeff,
just-
Bryce, and Bobby have their hand up. Oh, sorry, Angelique.
Yeah, hi. So I wanted to ask a question in response to Lindsay. Lindsay suggested combined meetings, and I think that's great to have the Council on Disability participating in other, you know, just other facets and stuff. My question is how that works with the bylaws, and, you know, well, it would be awesome to get, you know, if, you know, any one of us, any two of us, any three of us could just sit in on any particular meeting and kind of, you know, really, I wonder how it would work in terms of bylaws, in terms of our hours and availability, and how does it work with, you know, if we can't get a quorum of people at a given evening meeting, say, because Bryce and Bobby and I can't all be there, or something like that. You know, is there a way for the council to kind of give input as the council without having to, you know, without having to necessarily have a quorum? And I don't know how that would work, but it would be something that would be great to make work.
All I remember, yeah, go ahead, Jamie, is like you have to post it, correct?
Yeah, my understanding of the open meeting law was if the commission is invited to another meeting to have a joint discussion about something related to the Commission on Disabilities purview, and there's going to be a quorum of commission members present, then it needs to be posted as a joint public meeting with the two groups. If it's the commission is just going, let's say, to a city council meeting, and the city council meeting is not necessarily dealing with issues related to the commission, then there's no need for the commission to be posted as part of that meeting. So it really depends on what the topics for discussion are going to be, whether or not the commission is sort of weighing in on that as the commission, or just there for other business. That makes sense. Not a very clear answer, but
it makes sense. I just would, I don't know, with, you know, the joint meetings, there's an additional impetus to be there that might not work with all of our work-life balance. And I just want to make sure that, you know, no one's members, you know, that not being there to have a quorum doesn't hold back the rest of the commission from being able to integrate in, you know. Yeah, but that kind of makes sense.
Oh, you.
Okay. Oh, there she is.
I kept pressing it over and over. Did you have something to ask, Mayor? Well, your hand up?
Yeah, I was just gonna quickly, I certainly hear those concerns around the meetings and joint meetings. I would also just, there are a couple of other, you know, you can send a written statement to any standing committee or board, or to my office or to city council to be read into public record. You can do so as an individual or as a member of the commission or joint state from the commission. Also, in the past, depending the timeliness of what needs to be brought forward, commissions and committees have written a statement or something they really want to weigh into, and I read it during mayor communications if it didn't make the 48-hour, like when the city council packet went out, and we've done that, or even had a speaker if it's related, that something's time sensitive, I can access mayor's communication. I'd like to, I try to be sensitive to the city council's agenda and whatnot, to not do it literally an hour before. But if it was that urgent, you know, I mean, there are options to do that.
Eli, did you have a question?
Hello?
Yeah, well, not exactly a question, but I just want to make something clear that, like, in my can you hear me?
Yeah,
What?
I can hear you now.
Oh, in my personal experience with other people, like, talking to me as a member of
I
this
wanted to
commission.
watch it this morning, but
Oh, Kate, you're not muted.
sorry.
Oh. And also from preliminary responses from the survey is that the biggest problem we have is sidewalks and the sidewalk maintenance. And I really think that we have to bring roadway and sidewalk maintenance into one system and one standard, and also one kind of approach to design, so that sidewalks don't become this like dumping ground for all of the things that we want to put somewhere that we don't want to put on the roadway. So that's one thing. And the second thing is, yeah, when I first moved here and I noticed like and I saw what the municipal building looked like, you know, I was like, I mean, not only is it bad for people with who need to use the elevator, but it's also just an extremely like unwelcoming building. And I eventually thought, well, like it doesn't even have a front door, right? Which was confusing for me trying to get in for the first time. And I thought one thing that could fix that, it'd be very expensive, but I think it would bring a lot of value, would be if there's an atrium attached to it where the Payson Avenue entrance is. And then there could be a front door there that could then bring people into all the different ways to get up and down stairs, and also serve as a community space for events.
Thank you, Eli. Luis, did you have your hand up or no?
Sorry, no. I
Okay,
was applauding something that Eli said because it sounded really good.
that's what I thought, but I wasn't sure. I just wanted to give you the opportunity.
Thanks.
Bryce and Bobby, do you have any questions for the mayor?
Bobby has a question.
What shall we do about money wise?
What should we do money wise?
Yeah,
Money for what?
for ability,
For disability?
disability, sorry,
How do we get money for
Yeah.
disability?
yeah,
For people or
Yeah,
for
for people.
projects?
for people.
For people. Do you mean like the disability
Yeah.
check you get from the government?
Yeah,
Okay.
now it can be understood.
Help you understand it?
Yeah.
So that, okay.
If I could just, yeah, I mean, I guess the quick and easy answer would be, oh, well, that's not municipal government, but it is. So one of the things that we're looking to do, we're in the process of hiring and we're expanding is our Department of Public Health to include outreach and social workers and folks who are familiar with such systems, or making sure that those who are familiar are doing either virtual or in-person meetings with residents of Easthampton, so they can rightfully access the full potential of support. We're, as I said, we're looking, we've started to expand and we're just hiring, but also bringing in some of our regional partners to augment those services. Similar to what we see with the senior outreach, or we have family outreach that we're going to where people are. We want to expand that to all of our communities. So I'm hoping to report back something more positive, or I shouldn't even say, it's not that that's not positive, but something that actually happened sooner rather than later. I think the timeline for figuring that out and getting it moving will be after the first of the year, like in February of 2022, with then trying to get something permanently into the budget going forward.
Okay.
One thing I wonder too, as part of that, I think it's a really good question, Bobby, because I feel like, and it's actually interesting, as part of hiring these people, what I notice with community-based resources and supports is that they tend to be driven by people who are not experiencing or are not maybe receiving the checks that Bobby's talking about, or are not kind of experiencing the same ways of receiving money, or so they don't naturally have the same questions. So I wonder how our community members who are impacted by these systems could actually, if we could flip the leadership a little bit so that they can drive the things that they're curious about or need, because historically in social work and elsewhere, it doesn't tend to be that way. But I have never, I think it's a really interesting question, and I'm certain that Bobby's not the only person who's wondering, but I do worry about how leadership structure tends to continuously disenfranchise people who receive things that are different from what the people who are executing on those services provide.
Kelsey, I think that's a great point. And certainly when I work more directly in fields just relating to benefits and whatnot, entitlements, saw that all the time, even to the point where perhaps a client would mention something almost like off the top of their head, and the outreach worker or benefit manager would be like, well, wait a minute, you do, like, hold on, there's a program for that or something, because they weren't, you know, they meet with folks for 25 minutes, or they don't ask the questions for this, you know, from that exact perspective. I mean, I think that there's a, I don't know, I don't have an answer, but I think it's a really valid question. Something similar happens at the Council on Aging, where the caseworkers work with the volunteers to go through paperwork with elders or a family, trying to figure out what the best services are for how a person wants to live and how they do live, rather than here's this check, that's what you get, and there's no conversation.
Yeah, I think it's definitely deeply embedded ableism that drives that, and the idea that disabled people don't know what they need. So I would love to see that flipped, especially if we're hiring people right now. What a great way to kind of set an expectation. Cool. Thank you.
Keep going.
Why does it keep doing that? Lindsay, you were gonna tell people, the COD members, how if we want to bring a subject up, how it works behind the scenes with the city councilors.
Well, yeah. Basically, most of the work of the city council happens in our subcommittees. Once it comes to the full council, that's when it's already been kind of worked on and it's coming on to the full council for a vote. So for example, the memo that you wrote on the snow removal, and that's a really important issue to the public safety and to the access of the city for people with disabilities. And that universally designed for many people with strollers, all sorts of people that are walking and rely on walking to get around. So you can kind of think about which committee that it makes the most sense where it would be worked on. Or you can just, reach out to a city councilor and, ask them. Well, this is exactly what you did with that memo. So now I have something in hand. We have something in hand as the ordinance review committee, but also if you had just given that to one counselor, we have something in hand that we write. We have to first bring it to the full council to get it put on an agenda. So the full council has to vote to put anything on an agenda. So then that will be coming forward in this upcoming Wednesday's meeting. And then we will be making a motion, probably Omar Gomez, who's the chair of the public safety, to move that to the public safety committee. And then we all vote to put it on the agenda. And that's how it gets on an agenda in a committee to be worked on. And that way, then once it's on our agenda, it would be great for people from your commission to show up at our meetings and work on it. Because if we put together something, language for an ordinance or recommendations to the city, or we call in, DPW to talk to us about that topic in particular, then we can take something from our committee and move it back to full council for a vote, whether we're making an ordinance or an official recommendation from the city council. So that's kind of, you want to get it onto a subcommittee's agenda, but there needs to be something tangible there that we're working on.
Thank you. Kelsey, would you be able to do a quick little update of our little subcommittee meeting that we had on the survey?
Oh yeah, sure. I think Eli touched on it a little bit, but so far we have just under 60 or so responses, and I think it closes next week, right? So the survey itself was pretty lengthy, and so I'm actually surprised we received as many responses as we did. But they were also really helpful. I would say the major themes that were kind of spread throughout, and of course, Angelique and Eli, keep me honest, where it was the one that Eli mentioned. So a lot regarding mobility, access to roads, sidewalks, and buildings. And then secondarily, there are quite a few comments on police behavior towards disabled people. So I thought that was really interesting, and something that I'm certain we will be commenting on in our report out. I would also say there were several comments on public discrimination, like in the area of discrimination that we talked about in the survey. People kind of provided that there's like a pretty, I would say it's like pretty significant, just given the number of different people who said something about it, of being kind of harassed on the street as a concern. So of course, I think there's a lot of opportunity for really deep education on ableism as we talk about racism, ageism, sexism. I think we're not doing anyone justice if we don't address ableism as a part of those conversations. And I think we see that in the comfort people have in harassing disabled people explicitly, implicitly, etc., in our community. So I think those were, from what I can recall, major themes. We had a pretty dispersed age range of people who sent in responses, as well as there were definitely, I think it was like 4 or 6 people who, from what we could tell, most likely are also providing commentary based on having a child in the school systems with a disability, which was also interesting. And then we did have a couple of responses for people who come to Easthampton, or they may either work or visit frequently, who live in other towns. So it was kind of interesting to have their perspectives as well as visitors. So I think retrospectively, the next time we do this in a few years, hopefully, we'll adjust some of the ways we ask certain questions. But I think overall, it's a really nice pulse on what's happening across a variety of ages and experiences, because we did have a pretty different cross section of disabilities and multiple disabilities that were people who responded. Anything you want to add, Angelique or Eli?
I don't. You covered it pretty well, Eli.
Yeah, I think, yeah, nothing to add.
Yeah, I know, Lindsay, you wanted to hear about like the 1-3-5-year plan, but that's, you know, I want to hear people's ideas, commission members or otherwise. So part of it's going to come from that survey, and then I just, you know, want to keep brainstorming with members if they have particular interests that they want to do with why they're on the commission. Does anybody have anything specific they're hoping to go on that list?
I
That does-
know, Angelique, you, like when I first joined, you had mentioned like at least in the 1 year, so now we're probably a year out from that, but it took a long time to get traction. And I think there are several immediate pieces that really need to be addressed. So thinking 1 year as in like a year out from now, meaning we clearly have some significant like review and auditing to do of our, like, whether it's our contracts, our processes, how we're included, how we're not included, things like that. And then secondary, like second to that, a lot of education and awareness. When I first joined, that was like number one on your agenda, Angelique, and I think it's really important. I'd love to see a roadshow for the different committees by this committee. I'd love to see, we started a subcommittee, myself, Angelique, and Jeff Brown, on disability celebratory actions and days, as well as monthly themes for education. The challenge we're running into with that is a lack of a platform to be able to more easily provide content out to the community. We were told that people couldn't post to the Easthampton Facebook because it's too much work, even though we were asking for one post a month, and that sort of got sorted, but it's just not ideal. We were told we couldn't get a Facebook page because of all sorts of things. And so I think we're really looking for concrete, we can do this and we can't do this, and also where we can start removing some barriers to be able to access and provide that education to our community members in a really efficient and effective way, so that that subcommittee can get some traction. And we can't really tell counselors, committee members, community members that they have to do something or engage in a certain way if they don't understand why. So I think there's a danger in limiting the ability to provide education, but I know that there's red tape because there always is. So I think we really need to figure that part out so we can kind of project this education platform forward, so we can start also having people come in and share their experiences, speak on behalf of different services, or just having people in the field to provide presentations to our community to help them understand that they're welcome here, that they belong here, that there are people who are here to support them, that we're seeking their input, that we're thinking about them. But we also need funding to be able to do that in a way where people can access it. So we need access to audio description for that. We need to be able to get captioning for that that's compliant and not what the deaf community calls craptions. So like we have to be mindful when we do these things so that we're not just doing them to tick a box, but we're doing them thoughtfully, intentionally, and with the community's best interest in mind. So I think to sum all of that up, I think there needs to be some deep auditing and reviewing of our current situations that are happening. And I think there needs to be a plan put in place, but then simultaneous and parallel to that, there needs to be a push for community awareness and acceptance through education. And I'll stop talking.
Thank you, Kelsey. Did anybody want to follow up on that, or Kate, do you have anything? You're so quiet. That's okay if you're quiet though.
No, it's okay. No, I think I'm curious to see what the responses from the survey bring. Being new to the committee myself and new to the city as well. I'm curious to see where we fit in terms of promoting disability awareness in Easthampton and what we can do individually to help promote accessible activities within the city and just being more inclusive. So I don't really have any specific plan ideas, but I'm so far excited to see how active the committee or the Commission on Disability has been since I've only been here maybe 4 or 5 months. So it's exciting.
Mayor LaChapelle, is there a way to get a bank account at all? or-
It's pretty complicated for the committees to have a bank account. I would ask, we can talk about the purposes or access to funding without a bank account. I mean, I would certainly some CODs fundraise. They usually, in my experience, they use a third party not-for-profit that they're working on for a specific project, whether that's educational fair or whatnot. But it's certainly something to talk about. I have some follow-up questions on the survey and the report out. Is there a timeline where that report out is expected?
The report out? No, not yet. Because it ends on the 15th and then it's going to take us a little bit. Kelsey, did you want to say something?
I think it will honestly depend on how often the subcommittee can meet for that, and then also what will come out of our, similar to like the council, like the subcommittee, back to the full committee, back to the subcommittee. It took how many years for the survey to come out? I mean, I would venture to guess it will be at least like 4 to 6 months.
It would be great to get, I mean, we don't have to wait for it, but the survey would be really helpful for us to search for different funds. And when you were talking about auditing or whatnot, an exercise like that and bringing in a consultant to work with the COD on that, it sounds like it's time. And I was just looking for some backup from your work to help fund that. And then education, I'm certainly willing to get some funding for education. I would, and it's the bane of a municipal life. The amount of money we can get for education, or it is based on that survey, and then that we've started an audited process, and there'd be a public piece of that would be education, but also more information. I mean, I think that's a process that we need to undertake, and I'm not hanging it up on that survey by any means. I was just asking. We can continue to look at funding around that, including ARPA funds. So,
do you know if we were to receive a grant, say, of some, from wherever, who knows, it doesn't have to be like state related. If we were to receive that money, where would that money be housed if there's no COD specific kind of account? And then does the town take a percentage of that funding to like oversee it? Or, okay, so that whole entirety of that funding would belong to the COD. Okay. Where does it live?
It would live in a grant account, and the purpose is specific to what the grant is for. It can't be reappropriated like with a 2/3 vote from city council or whatnot. I do think I sign off as the chief procurement office of the city, but the grant and what it's very specific. It's not, once it's written and granted, there's that grant award contract that, it can't be redirected. Certainly other committees have gone and written grants. I think of Nash Pond and whatnot. I would just encourage a conversation with Jamie about grants, and also, or about how to apply grants, but also Mike Owens, who does kind of all the procurement and has a sense of who's applying for what. so we're not overlapping or preemptive. There are a couple of grants that in the past we've applied for, we've gotten it, and then in the off year, somebody else has applied and gotten some funds, so we couldn't get part 2 of the grant. If that makes, just the timing of the grant, it's not about, oh, we don't want a grant for that. More, it's like, this is the timing. Or can we add it into another grant application? We've done it. But even doing that, the money comes back out to the activity it's written for, and to the folks who are, overseeing it.
Lindsay, did you want to say something about what your idea that you sent to everyone just now?
Well, I was just thinking about, I was just kind of just brainstorming, just ways that whenever there's city events, and I know that you guys have limited, time as well and busy people, but ways that can just raise awareness and education in places that people come together. So Art Walk, it'd be neat to have some kind of art event, and I'm happy to brainstorm about that. I was also thinking about Easthampton media and the power of media in terms of education. That's one of the ways that we kind of took to educating faculty at HCC. We did a big video about instructional design and the importance of designing from the beginning. And we had a lot of testimonials from students and getting to see screen readers in action, and same thing when we tried to push other initiatives. We starting with a kind of a video that created emotional connection and pathos and education. So I think we have Easthampton media in town, so it'd be interesting to see if there's any kind of grants around that. There's also the ECC, the Cultural Council grants come out every year, and like kind of thinking creatively, like what could we do as a community creatively around raising awareness in the city and using funds, those types of funds.
It could be really neat to do like a disability story lab almost from like through Easthampton Media. And then like you're talking Art Walk, I wonder if it's possible to tell stories through like doorway kind of things that could be throughout the city. So like leveraging different functions for people who use or don't use technology. But yeah, I think that would be really interesting. And it sees something like that could be great in conjunction with like a disability celebratory day as well.
We could also potentially reach out to, Easthampton, like in Cottage Street and Eastworks, and say, this is something the Commission on Disabilities is thinking about. Are there any artists who would like to partner with us that have an idea? Or if there's because it might be like, an artist that has a disability or cares deeply also, or just interested in, so it'd be kind of just throwing it out there to artists in the community to see who might be interested in partnering.
I have to go to my next meeting, but I just want to add one thing to Lindsay of Pasqualina and ECA, our arts coordinator, really since 2018 has built up this youth arts initiative program, and it's been found outside of curriculum. It's really, I'm just wondering if there's not similar funds for what the work that Lindsay is talking about. But I will, I have to jump. Great. I'm happy to come back at any time. I hope to have some positive news to report back. And thank you for the invitation. Have a great day. Stay safe and drive.
Bye.
Thank you.
It is 11 o'clock, so does anybody else have something they want to add before we have to close up?
Sorry I was late, but I was taking notes.
Oh, Kelsey did it this time.
Oh, you did? Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Well, that's okay.
That's okay.
That's what I get for being late.
It's okay, Eli. We'll use all of the notes that we can get.
Awesome.
Okay.
I guess I can just say what I had here, if anyone else for next steps, I have some high-level guidance on the possibility for a step-by-step process for integrating accessibility into procurement. Perhaps we could invite the IT team as a next step. And then another one, sending some example contract language that could kind of get the ball rolling. Those are the only two immediate next steps I got out of that. But if anyone else has anything to add that I missed, I can get them in here.
I don't think so.
I mean, on that note, it would be good to, we're gonna, I mean, hopefully be doing things in person. So it would be good to, I don't know, work out how to do hybrid meetings.
Mm,
Just want to add, that's not going to happen for a little while, and
Oh.
City Council is going to be taking the lead on figuring out the hybrid sort of method and what that looks like. And once they've figured it out and demoed it with City Council hearings, then it'll be rolled out to other committees. But I believe that they're waiting until we stop using Zoom and switch to the Google meeting software. So it's all just one, it all rolls out at the same time. So
Oh.
it's not something that the COD has to worry about right now. But if you're interested in taking part in that conversation, then the City Council would be the place to provide input.
Thank
Okay.
you.
Also, that's Google Meet is very annoying. So I'm disappointed that we're going to that.
Yeah.
Luis, did you want to say anything before we go?
No, thank you for the invitation.
Of course. So I think the next meeting is November 2nd.
Thanks for coming, Louise.
Yeah,
November 2nd.
okay. All right. So yeah, thanks for coming, everybody. And we will chat about all of this. Bye, Bryce. Bye, Bobby.
Have a good day.
Bye.
You have a
Bye.
good day
Bye,
too.
everybody.
Bye,
Thank you.
Kate. Bye, Jamie.